Hello and welcome to Hey Live with Lianne Potter. Hello, Lianne. You just there, aren't you?
Hiya.
How you doing? You all
Hiya.
right?
Yeah, good, thanks.
Got the
Looking
right
the wrong
side.
way, but never mind.
I know. I can never figure out which way it is. Massive welcome. We'll do proper instructions in just a second. But yeah, big welcome to why the cybersecurity industry needs to hire more anthropologists with Lianne Potter. Before we introduce Lianne properly, she can tell us a bit about how she got into digital, and we can talk a bit about some of the topics this evening. I feel like we should just, it'd be rude not to mention the sponsor for this evening, which is Cafe Digital. Conveniently someone that me and Lianne are both working with at the moment, which always helps. But yeah, so
Good
thanks to
sponsor. It's a good sponsor.
very good sponsor indeed. So yeah, massive thank you to Caveat Digital for sponsoring the event. If you check out their Twitter account, they've got an event running in a week's time with Bernard Rucker of Camunda. It's on process automation and enhancing decision making. Check it out. I think there's a link to a meetup page with more information. And obviously we are hiring as well. So if you want to have a look on the Caveat site, you can also find out more about roles that we've got going on at the moment. But yeah, thanks for that. So Lianne, welcome.
Hiya. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. I mean, I'm really happy to have you on board. We met at the first time I think a few years ago at a She Does Digital versus Hey event. I think actually we were talking about routes into digital, and it was about your background in anthropology into cybersecurity at the time, wasn't it?
I was flogging this horse here.
So we've talked quite a bit on the topic already in the past, but obviously we've got some new things to discuss this evening, and we're focusing particularly on the kind of human element of security and some of the interesting things around that. But before we do that, do you want to talk a bit about yourself and kind of your background?
Yeah, so I'm relatively new to tech. I started in 2018. I got into tech when it was after I actually did my anthropology degree, and it was sort of led by that. I was a project manager for a charity, and we were dealing with destitution. And what I was noticing, people coming through to our service, and one of the main barriers to them getting out of destitution was their inability to access digital services online. So I became really fascinated with what's known as the digital divide, which sort of suggests if you don't have access to online services, access to say things like housing and benefit system that's online, you'll be socially disadvantaged. And boy, as COVID really shown that at the moment, that actually really is the case and still going on today.
Yeah.
So I thought, oh, well, I'm really interested in actually how do I do tech for good? So I picked up anthropology and started focusing on digital anthropology because I was really interested in how the technological world could really impact society and culture and how it was changing. And just fell head over heels in love with digital. Decided the best way to get into tech was to teach myself how to code. That was literally the linear thought with, if I'm going to get into tech, I'll teach myself how to code. So that's what I did. So I started my tech journey as a software developer. And as soon as I was in there, though, I was putting my hand up saying, I want to do more security stuff.
Yeah.
And luckily, nobody seems to really enjoy doing the security work. As a developer, putting my hands forward saying I want to do security things, people pretty much bit my hand off and said, yes, you can do security work, and fell head over heels in love with security. And that's where I am at now. So using my anthropology masters to really inform the decisions I make in terms of raising awareness around security, and also the cultural aspects of actually getting everyone on board with security.
Amazing. So we'll get on to kind of security a little bit shortly, because that's obviously the topic of this evening. But before Covey, you worked at the NHS, didn't you? And I think the thing you mentioned in terms of that digital anthropology is quite an interesting topic. The work you did with the NHS was quite relevant for that, wasn't it?
Yeah. So one of the main things we were seeing, obviously, I started after WannaCry. Now, WannaCry obviously was in the news. You all saw the news stories of swaves and swaves of hospitals being taken out by ransomware. So I wasn't on the sort of front line when that happened, but we were still feeling the knock-on effect of that, and it was still very much on people's fingertips. And what I started doing was I was going to sort of meet clinicians as part of a leadership course, which got us in front of lots of different people. As a techie, you don't really get access at the NHS to doctors and nurses and things like that. But this leadership course really gave me that opportunity. So I was just talking to them about what I did. Everyone else was pretty much sort of frontline working, and I was back office stuff. And they were like, "Oh, cybersecurity, that's interesting. Oh, you're the people as well, though, that make us have these long passwords and stop us from gluing our smart cards to the computer and things like that." I was like, "We are, but let me explain why." And then I started telling stories in a different way. So rather than just going, "Oh yeah, well, we're just trying to stop ransomware," finger wagging, which security can often be, I decided to sort of tell the story in a different way. So I was able to talk about a story that I had heard, and it was about a woman who'd gone in for a cesarean section. And so she went in, it was, cesareans are booked in. She didn't know that a ransomware attack was going to hit the hospital she was going to. Halfway through the cesarean section, ransomware hits, the computer system's down. It's fine, they're doctors, they're surgeons, they don't need the computer to work. So they carry on with the cesarean section. She has a lovely baby girl. And then she starts getting a few complications from the operation, and her temperature goes up. And they go, "Okay, we need to give you some antibiotics, bring that temperature down." Kind of common things, that can happen after surgery. Except what happened was, because computers were down, they had to do it over the telephone. Unfortunately, there was a miscommunication, and she was given the wrong dose, and her temperature kept going up and up. Nobody could figure out why. And then it went to such an extreme that she actually ended up losing her hearing.
Right.
And that was the knock-on effects of WannaCry. So when doctors and nurses were sort of saying, "Oh, well, so immediately when they think of ransomware, they think to financial implications. Yeah. And they go, "Well, we're a hospital. There's no real financial implications. With the NHS, it's free." But the implications is you didn't have access to her medical records. You didn't have access to see what dose she'd just been given.
Yeah.
We couldn't track that kind of thing. And now she's lost her hearing because of it. And we actually had last year our first recorded death, not in the UK, but in Germany, of a woman dying on the way to hospital due to a ransomware attack.
Yeah.
So there are real human consequences to this happening. It's not just financial gain, that's often the end goal, or stealing intellectual property. And the knock-on, the fallout from those events happening can be massive.
Yeah,
absolutely massive.
And that's the thing, the target in that case wasn't a financial one, was it? So it's interesting to see the different attack vectors and the different potential targets. NHS is obviously, one that is definitely less financially driven, maybe, and it's interesting to dig into the psychology of that, isn't it? Really. But before we, sorry, go on.
I was going to say, and the knock-on effect of that, though, telling the story that way and saying, actually, this happened to this person, because you play on that doctor's need. They take the Hippocratic oath, I'm going to, preserve life as best I can, do no harm. You put that into context, actually. That's why we ask you to have good passwords. That's why we tell you not to click on those links and things like that. And then at the end of it, they turn around and go, "I realise now, I actually get it."
Yeah.
And then that's when I sort of realised, you need to tell the story right. You need to tell it in a way that makes sense to people, not just this is the cause and effect, really, but actually, how does that relate to your everyday life? And that's where anthropology comes.
Well, I was going to say it is interesting because the perception of security as an industry, and I'm gonna say it, I think it's an industry of gatekeepers. Is the perception from the outside, and the problem is that no matter how good you are at gatekeeping, there's those human factors that are always going to be the weakest part of the process, isn't it? Really, so. Having that knowledge of what the industry was perceived as, why go into it?
That's a really good question. Yeah, the security industry has a PR problem for sure. Yeah. I think one of the reasons, and I know this is kind of crazy, one of the reasons I like it is because I think we've got a really good story to tell.
Yeah.
I mean, the stories we could pull out of the bag to influence people. I mean, that one story is harrowing. That person went into one of the most life-changing things ever, giving birth to their first kid, came out deaf. You wouldn't expect that.
No.
It's not a great story, like, in terms of the human peril, but actually, to put in case point to influence behaviour, that's a pretty good story to use, and there's many of that, it's very much the sort of hero and villain, nations tumbling and falling. That storytelling is actually really interesting to me,
Mm.
and how that all connects to the human element. And one thing I think we tend to lose sight of is when we think of a hacker, we don't think of them as a person.
Mm.
We turn them into this boogeyman mentality, and that sort of creates that sort of disconnect. And then I think that's where that leads to when you're trying to influence, better security behaviors. People don't see it as actually there's a person behind all this doing this.
Mm. With their own
They relate to it.
motivations.
Yeah, they don't relate to it on that level. They see the hacker as part of the tech,
Mm.
because it's just the screen. But actually, there's always a person driving it, and most of the strongest ways people get in, the most famous cases of breaches and hacks, it's by someone, a person, clicking a link. It's by someone letting someone into the place they shouldn't be going into.
Yeah, it's particularly interesting as well in kind of COVID times, as we're calling it, because the security fatigue is there along with other online fatigue, general fatigue of the situation, and all it takes is for your guard to be down slightly and for that to be taken advantage of. So there are going to be human situations that will still allow you to be to be breached, if you will, but I think it's about mitigating those options, isn't it? And there's loads of resources available to try and Troy Hunt runs a really famous site around password breaches and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're in the know, there's loads of resources available to you. But generally, it's probably not the likes of us that are as susceptible. Possibly, I don't want to say that, touch wood, but it's more some of the human factors that kind of are the main problem.
Yeah, very much so. And you say, not us, hopefully. I mean, one of the things I do to really, again, reiterate the sort of storytelling aspect is for inductions. I don't do an induction where I go, this is a company policy, this is what we don't want you to do as a company. My company induction for security is called All the Times I've Ever Been Hacked. And it's a storytelling process about, when I was at university and someone sent emails to my whole inbox, hey, do you want to look at my pictures? Like that, and sent them to everyone. I was mortified.
Yeah.
This is like, mid 2000s. I was really, really mortified. And then that was because I used the same password absolutely everywhere. I never say like what the remediation process is. It's obvious. I don't need to tell you what the remediation process is. I was an idiot and used the same password everywhere when I was at university. Everywhere, and I had to change it everywhere. It took 8 hours. Then I'll talk about the time when I was working at the charity, and we kept pressing refresh on the patching. That annoying button that says "remind me later." We kept pressing that because the whole team did that for like a week. We eventually got hit by ransomware and we lost everything. We did not recover it. We were a charity. We didn't have the IT tech in-house. We lost everything, as well as time and effort. Again, I don't say what the remediation is. I just said this is what happened and these were the consequences. So I think it's definitely just telling it a different way. And actually, and I think particularly for someone who works in security, saying actually even happens to me. Yeah.
Because there is that kind of blame culture, isn't there? And that's a really dangerous place to be, I think. Obviously, we're all susceptible to hacking. The human angle is the weakest angle, really, isn't it? No matter how good our password management is, no matter how good our security is in general, we are the weakest link. So, yeah, it's interesting. So that kind of blame culture, how do we? Because in larger organisations, I'm trying not to direct this at kind of any particular group, but it's in large organisations, people want to be seen to do their job, and it just want to make sure that we try and implement the security precautions as best as possible. How do we, in larger spaces, move away from blame culture and move kind of more organically towards that education angle?
Well, we need to acknowledge that there'll be a level of cognitive distance there, and by what I mean by that is people want to be seen as doing the right thing. If I go up to you today and say, can you make your password longer because it's good? You want to do that. You know that. You know deep down that that's the right thing to do. Whether or not you do it, that's another thing. And there's this whole thing about actually, I want to do good, but I don't want you to know that I also don't do good. That I also, I know what's right for me. I know what I should be doing. but I'm not doing it. Don't find me out. And that can lead to people putting their head in the sand and thinking, if I just don't acknowledge it, then the risk isn't there. But that's not the case. But in terms of how you get over that in an organization, it's all about trust. And as humans, we really like to feel empowered. I mean, let's put, COVID case in point. Think about how hard it has been to encourage people to wear masks, to stay indoors. It's a small minority, but encourage people to do the right thing for other people. And on this occasion, it's mandated by the government, and there's fear of death as well. And it's still been really difficult to change that behaviour. And that's because we make constant mental shortcuts. And we will always try and do whatever the least path of resistance is. And that obviously forms habit-making behaviour as well. So when you're talking about how do you influence a whole company to do it, you can't do it overnight. It's like asking a smoker, who's been smoking for 20 years to just stop smoking. Think about how long we've had passwords for. I mean, my very first password was for a Casio Dear Diary. I don't know if anyone will remember this.
I know you mean.
Remember the adverts in the 90s? A little flip up, little Dear Diary. That was my first password. So what was like 12, something like that. Like kids today have passwords as well. For the iPad and things like that. How long have we had passwords for? How long have we been having bad passwords for? A long time, because especially like nowadays with kids and things like that, you start off small. You're not gonna have a long, complicated password. That habit sticks. So security has a big problem with the human element because the habits are really, really tough to break. And it's going to take lots of little nudges. So nudge theory really plays into that. But also finding really good influencers. And I mean that in like the literal sense as well, like you would an Instagram influencer. You need to get people on board who can really shift that minority thinking. And empower a sort of culture of trust. Because when people feel trusted, then they'll come to you when something bad happens. And that also is the main part of security. Like, things will happen. As an industry, we sit around going, yes, it will happen one day. We are just waiting for it to happen, really. We're putting controls in place, steps in place, but, it'll happen. It'll happen to everyone. So what do we do about a culture that might be fostering a fear from reporting because of that cognitive dissonance? I know you've told me I need to have good passwords, but I've not been doing it, and now the system is down. You've got to have that culture where you can turn around and go, it's okay as long as you tell me. Please just tell me that something has happened.
It's a bit like when you go to the doctor and they ask you how many units a week you're drinking. It's what the right answer needs to be, but sometimes it's easier to ignore it and kind of continue the way you are. And I think it's
as a security person, I don't want you to tell me what you think I want to hear. Just tell me the truth.
Exactly. There's a question from Matt Shields. I'll hold my hand up because the way I said the sentence was loaded. But people sometimes have a bit of false confidence because they think themselves as tech savvy, and that's totally true. I did it just then without even thinking. It'll be fine. We're in the industry. It's going to be okay. But anyone is susceptible to this. It's no one is, and that's the problem, isn't it? Really.
Yeah, and there's the whole sort of school of thought as well. And I heard it on a podcast recently, actually. And it was a group of behavioural scientists. It's really good. If I can remember what the name is, I'll share it in the chat maybe. Some behavioural scientists, and they were talking. Oh, well, I just feel like I don't need to do these strong passwords because they're not targeting me. And that again is the information is like, oh, I'm small fry. I'm small fry, but someone still tried to get into my Amazon account just before Christmas, and I realised where it was due to two-factor authentication. That's my little tip for you.
2FA is a lifesaver, isn't it? Let's be honest.
But like I work in security, and things happen all the time, and I'm small fry, and yeah. So you just need to get rid of that sort of perception that it will never happen to me.
Yeah.
They're not bothered about the target size.
No. It's probably strength in numbers as well, right? So
It's
you know,
definitely a numbers game.
yeah.
I would say that hackers are better at A/B testing than developers.
Well, I was about to mention that actually. By the way, Lianne has given me the most comprehensive list of notes I think I've ever been presented with before on these events. So it makes my life a lot easier because I know where we're going with it. But you did mention the A/B testing thing, and I think that's a really important thing to note because they're looking for these things. And I think in your example, you used phishing emails as an example, didn't you?
Yeah. So do you remember, like, early 2000s, how bad phishing emails were?
Yeah.
It was the prince saying, oh, I've just been left a load of money.
Yeah.
I need to get out of the country. Will you help me? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And there's loads of spelling mistakes and things like that. That's intentional. They're looking for the easiest mark.
Yeah.
And I say mark as if like a confidence tricks, like a con man would say, picking the mark. They aim it at that sort of denominator, because if you fall for it at that stage, then you're likely to carry on falling for it.
Yeah.
So people laugh and go, does that ever work? It does. They're really good at changing their tact to meet the right audience. So that A/B testing is really the case. So it really is literally, they test the audience. Does this work? Has this worked? What's the return on investment? Because it is a business at the end of the day.
And if you look at your spam today, you'll still see the same style. You'll still see a lot of the same errors. In terms of maybe logos and buttons looking slightly off. People who notice those minute details probably wouldn't fall for it, but it's more about the general kind of the people who slip through that gap, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah.
One of the things that you mentioned is there's the triangle of securities: usability, functionality, and security. The closer we move towards security, the more likely we have to compromise on functionality and usability.
Yeah, so if you picture a triangle, and then you have usability, functionality, and security there. So your security is there, and the more you move towards something being more secure, you're going to have to compromise on either functionality or usability. And that just is the case. And it's the same, you go the other way. You need to really, I think in this sort of environment where anthropology can really help, is if we're able to empower the people with enough knowledge of how to stop falling sort of like phishing, for hacks, clicking on the wrong thing, just being a bit more diligent, then we can sort of not completely disregard the security side. The security side is very important, but actually move towards more functionality and usability, which will then, I think, create more innovation.
Yeah.
And the more innovative we can think about these problems, I think the easier they will be to actually make them more secure in mind. But at the moment, you know yourself, when you're going onto a website, you don't want to have to go through 15 control steps, 15 ways to authenticate just to get to a site. You just want to place your order.
Yeah.
You need to make that sort of trade-off. And I don't think we're very good as an industry of saying we're happy to make that trade-off just yet.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the first good examples of that I've seen recently is Shop Pay. I don't know if you used it on sites, but they seem to have really cracked it, because obviously there's still weaknesses to the solution, but I like the fact that an email, it sends you a text or something, and then you're in, and it's remembered all of your data, and that's great. And that journey's baking that two-factor in, but you don't really realize it. It's kind of like a frictionless thing.
Yeah. And so what I want to try and do is really encourage, so there's obviously the developer happy path.
Yeah.
I want to encourage the secure developer happy path. Like, how do we start embedding those sort of principles in mind along the way, and saying, actually, there must be an easier way to do this, because too much security is not security at all, really.
Yeah.
Because people will find workarounds.
Yeah.
And one of the things I was sort of privy to a lot, like the NHS, was there's a lot of workarounds to get around systems. If you put, if you lock down a laptop, for example, people find workarounds, and sometimes, actually, most times, they're worse. They're a lot worse than what you're trying to prevent against.
Yeah.
So we need to really sort of think, what is the path of least resistance, because that's what's putting people off security.
Yeah. It's
Is the challenges that, you know, it's too much effort, it's too much hassle. I don't know what you're trying to stop me from doing, but
yeah.
it's stopping me from doing something I need to do.
It's funny you mention that because Sabia's mentioned in the chat that complete compromise in usability. I had to pay a visit to hospital today as my youngest sprained her ankle, and sadly I had witnessed this today. The password for the login was on a post-it note next to the monitor, and that's exactly it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's so tough to encourage that behaviour because, and this is where the sort of cultural element of anthropology can really help, is like understanding how do you change that thinking, because, you know, everyone will see that password and think that that's okay to do.
Yeah.
And it's not because, you know, they're not educated or care about security. They probably do care. If you told them that they could lose all their data in a minute because of that post-it note,
Yeah.
they would care.
Yeah.
But they also have a job to do.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's our job as security people to be like the silent helpers. We shouldn't really, if we're doing our job well, you don't know that, I would say.
So let's get into it then. Why do we need anthropologists in security then? So why specifically do you feel like that particular approach can help?
I think at the moment, security really prefers control over the cure.
Yeah.
Again, bringing all these virus metaphors, it's very topical.
Yeah.
And because of that, we fail to consider the human factor. And you got to think, you know, so hackers at the moment, it's you know, they're predicting it being a $10.5 trillion industry by 2025.
Yeah.
Look at security vendors that are selling products and tools. They're making what, 167 billion or something this year. It was a ridiculous amount. It's obvious that we think as an industry that we can just buy our way into security.
Yeah.
And that, you know, and don't get me wrong, the tools are fantastic. They really help. They're necessary. It's not a cure-all.
Yeah.
Just paying for something off the shelf to solve a problem is not the cure-all. The people element, like I always say, you know, you follow the cable. There's a person at the end of that. You need to really keep that in mind. And anthropology can really do that. And I think as well, because it's such a cultural thing, the way of work. I'm talking about security now in the way of work, you know, so we all have lives outside and it's all very applicable. But if we think of, in particular, security in the way of work, I always think it's really weird that if an animal did this, like a whole bunch of ants, all of a sudden logged into a computer at 9 o'clock Monday to Friday, that would be a really weird thing to watch. It's a cultural thing. You know, we all log in at the same time,
Yep.
you know, so we're all part of that shared goal, shared purpose. So we need to utilize the fact that we are a culture, a working culture, and utilize those principles in order to make things more secure for the benefit of everyone.
Yeah.
You know, so the idea is that, you know, a bit like, you know, we did when, you know, early humans were all gathered around the campfire. We told stories to each other to protect each other. We told stories to inform. We told stories to create a religion, to create, you know, spirituality around it. We told stories to entertain. When we're losing that sight of that, actually, that's one of the most powerful tools we can in education and making people aware of the dangers out there. So anthropology really plays into that. It also takes into consideration, which I don't think we're very good at as an industry, into people's unique circumstances. So, you know, we all have different capabilities, expertise, life experiences, cultural norms. We face inequalities, disparities in our sort of knowledge gaps and things like that. That's not taught in a computer science degree. As far as I'm aware, it might be now, but as far as I'm aware, it's not. And that's really important for understanding people's day-to-day life. So that's where what anthropologists do quite a lot of, and it's called participant observation. And I have to admit, it's something I did very soon on in my career at Conveyor. So you've all been observed. What participant observation is it's a methodology in which you really free yourself to understand someone's journey. You learn as much as you can about what their day-to-day is like, what their environment like, what they're like when they engage with other people. really get deep down into that knowledge and really understand what are the challenges this person's facing. What can this person, and then as you go speak to this other person, and you can see how that connects with other people in the organization, and then you build up this mental map of actually these are some weak points. People all want to work together because, like I say, working is a working culture. We're all striving towards the same goal, but we're all segregated into different tribes, as it were. We need to figure out what our commonality is, and so we can strive together, because together we're stronger.
Yeah.
So participant observation is really good for that, because it really allows you to get out your own head, your own biases. I'm not saying it's bias free, but your own. You try and, as much as possible, understand the other person's perspective and how they work. And then you can yield so much information, go, oh, there's a big gap there. I can solve that. I can fix that. You can't do that by just arbitrarily dictating controls, security controls to people without understanding what the consequences are.
I don't want to focus on the tooling because the anthropology side is obviously the main focus here, but you mentioned that the tools that we have at most of the organizations that we work at, and focusing on that behavioral change instead of relying on the tools. But and as you said as well, when security is done well, you don't really notice it. It's less about the tooling. But do you think there's certain tooling that we need to support this view of anthropology being the key factor? Do you think there's some things that we can use to assist it, or would you recommend hardly any tooling and literally just taking the cultural approach to trying to make that awareness to security a lot more
I wouldn't recommend get rid of the tooling.
So it's a blend of the two, I guess.
Because the tooling should be there to do the boring stuff.
Yeah, to catch the common, like your spam filters and things like that, right?
Yeah, because if you saw network traffic, there is no humanly possible way you could monitor that properly with just your plain eyes. No way. You need monitoring tools. Don't get me wrong. My most beloved time in security was knee deep in monitoring tools. Big fan. But what I'm saying is it can't be the be all and end all.
Yeah.
Because what you find by doing the human element, by doing the anthropological approach, is you actually see where the failing points are. A computer, program can tell you, actually, yeah, this port's open, close it.
Yeah.
But what's the context behind that? Why was that port open? Was it because this team needed it for this reason?
Yeah.
And did they need it for that reason, or did they just open it not knowing? You go find out. You can be too knee deep in the tools without realizing actually there's a wider, bigger picture, and that might be due to not knowing that port shouldn't be open, or it might just be they don't care that port should be open, and you just sort of sell them why it's important for it not to be open.
I guess it's all about communication, isn't it? It's about how you improve the communication in a large company. So how do you do that? How do you create that kind of community where it's a safe space to discuss those things, where awareness is at an all-time high? How do you do that?
You have to remember, so that's where participant observation really comes in, is the reason why it's good is because it's very individualistic. You're hearing one person's story at a time, you're really understanding that. And because we are individualistic, so I go again to the point about COVID, in other countries where, individuality is not as strong, they have more of a sort of a communal sort of feeling. Mask wearing, it's fine, the government says wear a mask, everyone wore a mask. In this country, for example, where we are quite individualistic, that's a lot more difficult. So you need to take that into account. And again, it's all about sort of the biases, sort of cognitive biases, where you think, I've spent a long time doing something a certain way. It's easier for me to carry on doing something in a certain way than to try something new. And there's this whole thing about the endowment effect. And that's where even if a better solution is presented to you, you'll still go for the solution that you've created yourself rather than go for something that's going to benefit you. And we found there's been research to show that passwords are exactly the same. So people still have that endowment effect. Like they know that their password is bad because they created it. They don't really want to let go.
It's the kind of not invented here mentality around your own security, isn't it?
we as humans seek to copy past behaviors. It's before in times when we were living together in like smaller communities and things, we needed to make those mental shortcuts because we had tigers coming after us and things like that. And I was going to say dinosaurs, and I was like, that makes me look stupid. I've been watching far too much like Jason and the Argonauts and things like that. So yeah, we need to make sure that we need those shortcuts. We needed to be able to go, okay, we need to act this way because I haven't got time to think about it because something dangerous is coming over the hills. We still have those shortcuts in mind. So I like to think of it sometimes. Some people say like we have like still have the lizard brain and the modern brain. That is a hangover. Our habits and our behaviors and our shortcuts, our workarounds, are hangover from our sort of lizard brain when we were just like, we need gratification, instant gratification. We can't see past actually the potential of the future. So that means that breaking those habits are really, really difficult.
Yeah.
And the way you do that is you have to be aware that you have to catch people in the right mindset. You can't, with the endowment effect, you can't change habits just because you want them to happen.
Yeah.
I could force a load of security awareness programs about passwords, for example, all in one go, and it could keep going and keep going. But if people aren't in the right mindset to change, again, going back to smoking, for example, if people aren't ready to quit, they're not going to change. And again, they acknowledge that some things, you speak to a smoker, they don't want to smoke, they want to quit. They know that there's negative health benefits to smoking.
Yeah.
But it is very difficult to break those habits. And I think maybe that's why anthropology and a cultural effect to security hasn't gone ahead, because in general, it's really hard in security to prove a negative.
Yeah.
When we do things like, you hear a lot of discussions about, it's really hard to get budget for security because people come up to you and say, well, what did you prevent?
Yeah.
You can't prove a negative. It's the same with the awareness training. It's like, if nothing happens, what are we preventing? It's very hard to get those metrics in.
It's kind of like the effort versus future benefit thing, though, isn't it? It's hard to really sell because sometimes it is quite a lot of effort to get to that end state.
Yeah, very much so.
So I've got a few mentions on the chat. I'm not sure if it's my connection or yours. Someone's watching or getting ready to watch UK Drag Race because we keep dropping in and out a bit, but we're all good. Don't worry. So there's a message from Graham just saying, great to hear security and innovation in the same sentence, much needed but not often heard, which is great. Matt Shields has said, do you find myself really not liking magic email links? Reminded by trying to get into this Slack. What do you make of magic email links like that?
I like them, to be honest, because they appeal to my instant gratification. Like, I don't need to.
Oh no, we've lost Lianne. Right, let's hope we can get her back. Just before we were talking when there you are.
I'm back. I'm back.
You're back. I was going to say we were talking about you getting ready for 8 o'clock for UK Drag Race. We were worried about the internet bandwidth.
As soon as it happens.
Well, your back's all good. Right, we'll crack on because I'm aware of the time. But
what time is it? I've not missed it ever.
No, you've got 16 minutes. Don't worry. We'll get you down in front of Netflix just in time. I can promise. Jim Moran's mentioned, think how people are easily manipulated to reveal enough information about themselves by a clairvoyant in minutes to think they had their mind read. Add in the stress of money losing scenarios and call out the blue when you're stressed at work. It's easy to see how people are duped. It's so easy to misdirect and abuse trust. And that kind of loops back into what I was saying earlier. That fatigue, that technical fatigue, the security fatigue is very real, I think, especially as we're interacting more with technology at the moment. Yeah,
very much so. And especially what they're really playing on is they are actually using trust against us now as well. So that there are the, as I say, the phishing ones that you see and you think, does anyone ever fall for those? There's those ones for a certain type of audience. But now there's the next level up, which is, the front of apparent credibility, which, sometimes try and live by as well. But um, there's that thing where, you know, we're seeing a lot more whaling, which is really targeted phishing, where, you know, someone will hack into the CEO's account and say, and then pretend to be the CEO and go to the finance department. Oh, I need this invoice paying ASAP. Transfer the money. You hear about these scams all the time.
Yeah.
Particularly house buying. You hear them like almost weekly now. These horrible stories. People's life savings completely gone, and it's just about that actually using a trusted source against you.
Yeah.
No technical control is going to prevent you from getting from that. You know, apart from the initial sort of stopping you, but once they're in, how do you police against that? You do it through education.
Yeah, it's a good. There's a good story recently actually that I could recall on this. A friend of mine, we had a booking to go on holiday somewhere. Obviously due to COVID, that's been pushed back and back and back. And there was a breach in the Booking.com system. So they had some of the booking details that we'd used, so they knew who we were booking with and who he was and all that sort of stuff. So they rang him. You know, I assume while he was quite busy at work, and said, you know, COVID, we're going to cancel the booking. You know, can we have the card to refund you? Fortunately, he, you know, something twigged it wasn't quite right, and he didn't hand over the information. But that's it, and exactly what Jim's saying. They rely on those exacerbated situations to really take control.
Yeah, in situations like that, always go where you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, go for that lizard brain for sure. Always go where you go with things like that.
Yeah, I was very impressed with him actually, because he used a Monzo virtual card as a burner, and it told him immediately when they're trying to take money. Nice. So yeah, little things like that are great. Matt's got a good question, which is, do people selling solutions need to be more honest about the gaps in their solutions so people don't think tooling will solve all of their problems?
Oh yeah, very much so. Yeah.
Difficult marketing site though, isn't it?
yeah. This will help, but not a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I'm not a salesperson at all, so I totally get why, you know, you got to make some money.
You got to spin it.
It's got a lucrative business, and you know, the role I'm doing at the moment, which is a lot of it is about cultural change and engagement. You know, you still have to hire a person to do that. You know, and it is something that you have to be on top of to keep doing. It's not something that, you know, an individual security person, like in a security team, it couldn't be just someone's, you know, a few hours a week job.
Yeah.
You know, you need someone constantly at it. So, you know, whereas these tools and things, you know, there's a cost that there is also a cost for the sort of things I'm doing as well. You know, me talking around and about, you know, might be free, you know, speaking to people, understanding their challenges, but you know, there's a salary at the end of that. So security will cost you either way is kind of what I'm saying. And in terms of actually being honest and open about, you know, what they can deliver, it's really hard to put metrics on anything security related. I keep coming back to it, but it really, really is, you know, how do you prove something like didn't happen?
Yeah, it's really hard to quantify that culture as well. It's really hard to explain why it's not a single person's job, why it's a collective role that everyone owns in security. And yeah, it's as you said, you can't prove all the things that never happened that you've prevented through that behaviour. You can only talk about the ones where they got through.
And I think that's why there's a lot of burnout in the security industry as well. I mean, and this was before COVID, but burnout was a real big thing in the security industry before COVID. And the reason why that is because we're not really project based.
Yeah.
You know, we're constantly just on a loop, just you know, on the treadmill. There's no real way for us to go, oh, that was a good day. You know, we stopped this, like, kind of.
Yeah.
You know, unless something's really coming over the wire, you can really see it. We're just kind of lying in wait, and it can be very stressful to be on that kind of high peak of stress constantly.
Yeah.
So, you know, big up respect to security people out there.
Yeah, definitely. You almost want that kind of gratification of the dashboard, you know, attempt to stop today that no one knew about. It's like,
yeah. Or cared. Well, that could be the other thing as well. Like.
Well, you know, the role in security is often, you know, highlighted when these things go wrong. But actually, there's so much that needs to be done to talk about the positive efforts that are done every day that people never see. It's one of those roles, isn't it? It's a difficult one.
Yeah, very much so.
There's a question from James. It's one thing to change company culture and educate staff, but it's an even bigger uphill struggle when it comes to the general public. Where do you begin? Do you begin with school? How do the public stay on top of these things?
Yeah, we definitely need to begin with school. As I say, with the example earlier regarding passwords. I just want to give a big shout out. I don't know if she's logging in, but for Wendy Gosha, and she wrote a book called Nettie in Cyberland, which is a children's book about cybersecurity.
Oh, amazing.
And she wrote a wonderful article where she said cybersecurity should be the next sex education. So
I like
taught in
that.
school. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
She says the way she described it, and I really loved it, was that we talk about cybersecurity to our kids like it's this scary thing. Like, back in the day when,
Yeah.
I'm sure most parents nowadays are so super woke and cool and can talk about sex to their kids all the time. But, when I was growing up in the 90s, that was the most embarrassing talk ever. She's saying cybersecurity is a bit like that now. So we're trying to warn our kids about the dangers without scaring them so much that, that they're terrified of going online and what might happen to them.
Yeah.
But also making sure they have the tools to protect themselves. So it's very much like the sex education chat. I think it is really important. And I believe it was her study as well. So they asked some primary school kids, would you share your password with your teacher and parents? And they were like, yeah, of course. So that's that kind of behavior early on. And now the problem is do we expect to teach children to keep that secret? Is that a big ask for kids to start using stronger passwords? But if we did, then we'd start developing really good habits early on.
Yeah.
That whole education piece, it does need to start sooner, but finding the right voice in which to do it, because security does tend to work on a lot of fear and despair.
Yeah.
And I hate using that kind of. I try and inject humor wherever I can into a story. But it does seem to be our default. And when you look at the research of what really works well in terms of disseminating a message, humor always comes out on top.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting as well because, the human factor is obviously the most important thing from what we're talking about today. But there are ways that technology can assist, I think. I mean, I'm sure we've all seen, parents where there's shared passwords on iPhones and iCloud accounts when you're watching content or whatever else, and Netflix and other things like that. So I think there's ways that technology can adapt to the way that the world works these days. But the human angle is obviously the most important part. So
I would agree.
We've got 8 minutes left, and I just want to talk a little bit or touch a little bit more on solutions. I'm very aware of Drag Race starting. I don't want to make you late for it, you see. So solutions really are a nice way to end on this talk, I think. And obviously we've talked a bit about security being a cultural adoption more than anything, and we've talked a bit about influences and stuff. Are there any influences that we should be following that you feel are worth noting? Is there anyone? Obviously yourself.
There's loads of really great people out there. What I would say, there's two companies that I think are really doing some fantastic work, and I really recommend either you follow them on Twitter or LinkedIn. So that's CyberOff with Ian Murphy.
Yeah.
Absolutely hilarious awareness content. Not always safe for work, but
Okay.
brilliant.
Noted.
Absolutely. Really, really good. Really, really funny. And Cyber Maniacs. That's Kath Goldman heads up that one, and she does cyber awareness with puppets, like the Muppets. It's really
Nice.
funny. Really love it. In terms of any sort of people who are working in security at the moment or interested in the human element of it, I'd recommend CyberSafe's security behavior database.
Okay.
And that's spelled CYB Safe. And they've got a really interesting sort of community building up all about sort of security behaviors and really digging into the sort of behavioral science element of it. So that's a really good one to keep your eye out for.
Awesome, thank you. And one of the kind of themes that you've mentioned quite a lot during this talk is participant observation. Have you got any tips on ways to do that in a non-weird way? Because if you're getting started with it, it's probably quite difficult to understand kind of how you should go about it, because it is, you want to be quite a passive person in that situation, don't you? You don't want to influence the behavior of the participant.
Yeah, you need to put people at ease. But the best way it's almost like a someone trying to hack into someone's account. You just kind of need to know how to get people to open up and start talking to you. Once you get them on that path, and just like, I usually start with, tell me everything that's really annoying you at the moment, and then just let them offload. People love to offload.
Like therapy. Let's just go.
Yeah, honestly, yeah. And I've heard it all. So I find that really useful to getting people to open up, and just having someone just listen and going, oh God, yeah, that does sound bad. That does sound bad. And then just make loads of notes and go.
Oh wow. Right. Okay. Yeah. But that's where the stories that you have around being hacked yourself and stuff can come into play, because it's the not the blame culture. It's the, me too. I've experienced that too, and it sucks. And yeah, it's kind of a bit of social engineering as well, I guess.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, that's what it's about.
I'm just having a look on it. So we've got from Jim, I don't trust myself or my family, so I've made us all 1Password family subscriptions users.
Nice.
Other vendors are available, but that's only 1 week point. So it's password managers. There's always a conversation around, but then all my passwords are in one place, and what if that gets breached? But there's the common conversation around, is that better than just 5,000 different weak passwords?
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. The idea behind a password manager is that your 1Password is really, really strong. So, if you Google brute force passwords and look on Google image, you'll see loads of pictures of really nice tables that'll tell you, if you've got this many characters and this many words and uppercase, lowercase, how long it'll take to hack.
I think I saw you share that today. Actually, it was all the common ones.
So I was looking at, my big password, and I was just like, 10 trillion years is good. I'll take that. 10 trillion years.
Yep, that's good. I won't have to worry about that then. It's fine.
So if you do it well enough, and the NCC, the National Security Centre's guidance at the moment is, free. I speak. I've lost the ability to speak because I'm thinking about Drag Race. Free random words. That's a really good starting point to building up a strong password. It's something you can remember. It has to be random, not your dog's name and not where you met your partner. And free random words.
Yeah.
That's the really good start of building up a really strong password.
It's funny you mentioned that, because Simon, who must have seen your post today, and he's been influenced by it, I'm a big fan of correct battery horse staple type passwords. So that combination of words, I think they work really well with children, as they're easy to visualize, and that's a great point. I wonder if that book that you mentioned goes into some of the psychology of some of that, maybe a little bit. And there's another one from Chris, which my cursor is nicely blocking it. But it says, I know quite a few parents who have faced huge credit card bills after their kids bought lots of apps as their password was saved on the device. This is what I mean in terms of, some of the ways that technology can assist this. It's not the solution, but, abuse from your own children almost. There's got to be better ways around it.
One of the things I would sort of suggest, and I know it's not quite easy with an iPad and things like that, is wherever possible, for example, on your laptop, try and have an admin account and then the account that you actually do everything on your day-to-day. So if anything goes wrong while you're surfing online or anything like that, it's stuck there and it's not going to hit everything else on you. You can recover a lot easier from there. So
yeah, I'm aware of the time. I want to talk more about mitigation strategies, but I feel like Drag Race is calling. So maybe we'll have to call it here, and we can maybe continue this conversation another day, because there's still loads. I'm only page 2 of your notes. That's how far we've got. But hey, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for your time. I think this has been a really good chat. I think we've covered some really important topics, and hopefully it will make us think a little bit differently about how we approach security and in our everyday lives. I certainly will do. Thank you so much for Conveyor Digital for sponsoring the event. Obviously, we're very grateful for that, and please do check out their website and their Twitter account. It's all on the Hey site. Lianne, thank you so much for your views on anthropology. It's been absolutely amazing to chat to you. But it is 7:59. I think you can just dash down and start Drag Race almost immediately. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast.
Cool. All right. Well, good night. And we'll speak to you all next time. Thanks very much.
Bye.
Bye.